Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today, our SFS Analytics session for advanced users using statewide financial system data to analyze spending. We're very excited to have the opportunity to bring you the session this morning. My name is Jeremy Kaufman with SFS, and I'll be joined today by Rebecca Jones, also with SFS. And let me just quickly run through the agenda for the morning. So we'll have a brief intro to SFS Analytics, and then the bulk of the session will really be focusing in on two reports, the Vouchers Posted to Cash Ledger, DW470, and the DW426, the P-card, net card analysis. And then at the end, we will have a question and answer period. At any time, though, feel free to type questions in the chat window, and we will, again, after we go through the presentation, go through questions. And also, Rebecca will be doing live demos as well in SFS Analytics to go over these reports that we're focusing in on today. So just a brief intro to SFS Analytics. This is our very powerful and interactive reporting tool to assist agencies with reporting data and analysis needs. You can access SFS Analytics from the SFS homepage through the Analytics tile. And this is for provisioned users. The role that you see is the role that you need to have access to SFS Analytics and the Analytics tile on the homepage. Data is sourced from SFS production as of the close of business 1 day prior. So as you'll see, and I'm sure Rebecca will show you on the going through, there is at the top there in this screenshot the data loaded as of date, so you always know exactly when that data is from that you're looking at. And the landing page provides quick access to different reports, user guides and resources, and report catalog. And some of the common reports used to analyze spending is what we're going to be focusing on today. The 557 expense report listing, the 438 ad hoc general ledger report, the 951 purchase order listing, the 128 contract dashboard, the 470 vouchers posted to cash ledger, and the new report that we will be going into is the DW426, the P-card, net card analysis report. So we're looking forward to show you that in a little bit. So just some brief info before we get into the live demonstrations. Just some overview of the Vouchers Posted to Cash Ledger report. This is available under the Document Listing Report section of SFS Analytics. And you can use this to view all vouchers that have posted to the cash ledger for the selected accounting period. And the journal date represents the date of disbursement. There's also the ability to drill down to initiating documents. And as all of the SFS Analytics reports have a Help tab that you can click on to access the report user guide that's available for this report. And then some overview of the P-card, net card, the new DW426 report. So this was added just this past April in 2021, and it's also under the Document Listing Report section of SFS Analytics. This report is used to view P-card and net card information in a variety of ways, including by employee, by card, and by time frame. And the report user guide, as always, is available through the Help tab on this report as well. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it over, and the bulk of the session now will be live demonstrations provided by Rebecca Jones. Rebecca.
Thanks, Jeremy. Good morning, everybody. I'm Rebecca Jones. I work on the SFS Analytics team, and I'm very excited today to talk about a few reports that we can use to analyze spending. Now, as Jeremy mentioned, there's many ways that we can analyze spending within SFS Analytics. So I chose just two reports today, which will kind of highlight easy ways to analyze spending. In particular, we are going to focus on P-cards. Now, we recently had onboarding for DOT, Department of Transportation, has started using SFS for their procurement and accounting needs. So with that onboarding, one of the requirements was P-card analysis. And we were very happy to develop a brand new report for P-card analysis. We realized it's been a little bit lacking in the past. There have been ways to look at P-card spending as a whole, but not the particulars on the card. So today I'm going to show you and start with the DW470, which is documents posted to cash, vouchers posted to cash ledger. And in this report, I'm going to show you how we can look at, out of all of those documents, how we can narrow it down to look at just the P-card spending that comes from cash. So as Jeremy mentioned on the slide, here's our landing page. I accessed this through the PeopleSoft login. And this should be familiar to most of you on the call. Hopefully we have users on today who are familiar with analytics and comfortable navigating through our system. So for those of you who might be a little bit new, I'll briefly kind of skim over the basics and how to navigate through our system. So once you hit our landing page here, you're going to see it welcomes you here to analytics. Here is the data loaded as of, as Jeremy mentioned. So we are not live SFS data. We have a separate data warehouse that's loaded every night, and it loads after the SFS process, batch process completes. So typically we're one business day behind. If that ever happened, if there's a problem with the load or anything like that, this data loaded as of date will be accurate. So if the load didn't run for whatever reason last night, it would say data as of October 27th, so we'd be 2 days behind. But currently we loaded last night, so this is accurate. Now, on the left-hand side here, you're going to see the collection of reporting areas. So these are the different subject areas that Analytics has reports. So we cover general ledger, budget reports, contract reports, document listing reports, so the specific at the document level, transactional reports. And also some agencies do have specific reports that don't really have a statewide need, so we stick them in a separate bucket. Now, if your agency does not have one of these reports, you know, you don't have it specific to your agency, you won't see the tile, just to be aware. So today we're going to talk and start our conversation with documents listing reports. And when we click that tile, here's the document collection. And when you hover over the reports, you're going to see the description in the box below. So today, we're going to start with the DW470 vouchers posted to the cash ledger report. So this report we can use to look at cash vouchers for the selected time frame. So just like all of our reports, you come to the first tab on the dashboard. So this report has two tabs, the listing tab and the help tab. This is where the user guide will be found. And now all of our prompt sections on the reports will have required selections. So you'll notice that now the apply button is grayed out. I can't click that to run the report because it forces us to make entries into these required fields that are identified by the asterisk. So right now I'm just going to run a sample. So I want to see all cash vouchers for a particular agency for, we'll say, 1 month, for April. So I'm just going to make a selection for fiscal year 22 for April, Now, you'll notice that my business unit automatically defaults to SFS for me. That's because I'm an SFS employee. There's logic built into these reports to kind of help the user so they don't have to make certain selections. So because it says SFS, that's because I'm an SFS employee. For all of today's examples, I'm going to pick on a different agency, and we're going to use corrections. I wanted a little bit larger agency with more data. SFS is very small, so we're boring with our data. So we'll use corrections, and you'll notice that I can choose a separate business unit. That's fine. The system allows you to do that. So right now, I'm asking the report to return all the cash vouchers for the month of April for this fiscal year for corrections. So that's very wide open. As we'll see in a minute, we can apply other filters to kind of narrow down our search. But let's just see what this looks like when it comes back. All right, so here's our report returned from those selections. A nice thing I like to do when I'm looking at the report itself, you can click this arrow here to collapse the prompt section because it takes up such a large amount on the screen. And you don't really need to reference that while you're looking at the report because all of your selections are maintained here in this filter box. So you'll see here's my fiscal year, my period, and my business unit. There's some other hard-coded filters in here that you have no control over. They just help drive the report. And so now let's look and see what sort of information is available on this vouchers to cash report. So you're going to see the business unit, GL and AP business units that I selected. Here's the vouchers that are associated to the transactions with the voucher line that's referenced in description, the amount of the transaction and who entered it, journal date and ID, journal line. So now we get into associated document information. So here's the vouchers. This is a voucher report. Now, if there are associated journals, purchase orders, or contracts, we can actually click on any of these blue hyperlinks, and it's going to drill down to give us more detail on these documents that are associated to this voucher and voucher line. So we have some more contract information. Now, here's the field I want us to pay particular attention to right now, supplier. But then, of course, we have invoice number for the voucher and some accounting and obligation dates. So you'll notice now that the supplier that was returned, because I asked the report to bring back all the vouchers for the whole month, it's got, you know, all different suppliers. As we go through, you can see that there's lots of different suppliers in here. Now, this isn't really, so my focus, as I mentioned, is going to be P-cards today. So how can we use this report to help us look at the total P-card spending for the month of April for corrections? So the way that we historically could get P-card information through SFS Analytics is to use this supplier or merchant field. You might see it on other reports. When I click here, it's going to bring up a list. So I click on this arrow and the list comes up, but I want to now use this feature at the bottom that says more search. I'm going to click there. Now for P-cards, the supplier is actually Citibank. So Citibank takes the payments and then kind of distributes it to the vendor. So from our perspective, the supplier at the time was Citibank. So if we do P-cards, you're going to see this top line here, Citi-P-card Citibank. That's the supplier that we're going to enter in the field to return only P-card transactions. So I've selected that by double-clicking. You also can click to highlight and use the arrow to send it to the selected side, and then I'll click OK. So now I'm going to run a report that's a little bit different, and it's asking to return the corrections vouchers that only have the P-card as the supplier. So I'm going to click Apply. We're going to rerun the report. And now you'll see that my supplier has been filtered here. It's been added to my filter. And when we look at the supplier column here, it's only going to say Citibank for the P-cards. So this is useful if you just want to get kind of in the month, what were my transactions, what were the vouchers, and all associated documents, you know, that go against those P-card transactions. If you scroll to the bottom, you can click this double arrow to expand. If there's lots of rows, it might take a moment. But at the very, very bottom, once it's expanded, you'll see there's a total row. So you can get a total for the month also, or whatever time period you selected. So you'll see here's the total, and also you can always take this to Excel by using this export feature. All of our dashboards, if you scroll to the bottom, you'll see export, and then you can choose which format you want to export to. Typically, you'll go to Excel. If your agency or your report query returned a lot of data, Excel sometimes doesn't like to accept those large volumes, and you can use CSV format under the data option. And it's not as polished and pretty looking, but all the data will be there. And so let's say I want to come in every month and run the same report. I want to see my P cards every month for my agency. So I don't want to have to come in here and make the selections every time. You can come to this page options icon and say save current customization. Once I click that option, a little box will come up and I give it a name, and I'll name this P cards, something like that. So I can make this customization. I can even make it the default for the report. So next time I come in, if I make this my default, the next time I come into this report, it will automatically run for the period that I saved it under. Now, if you're doing month to month, you may have to adjust the period, but at least you won't have to make other selections. So I don't want to make it default. I just want it available to me next time I need to use it. So I'll click OK. Seems to be a little slow or not functioning properly. So if I save that P card report and I come up here to the page options, I want to use that report again. I come back here and I can say apply save customization. And there should be the option, it didn't save, but there should be the option for P card report. And you simply just click on it and it will open the report with all of those saved prompts that you have saved. So we're going to actually see this in action when I go into the next report, the P card net card analysis report. So the P card report, the 426, is also located under the document listing reports. So we click that tile and you can find it here. So this report's used to sort P card net card information by various ways, and you'll see there's many tabs on this report. You can do by employee, by card. So for our demo, in an effort to save time and also to eliminate any security concerns in front of a varied audience, I've actually masked any employee ID field that you might see because we can tie these P cards to employees, and that's almost a large purpose and a large drive for the build of this report. In order to keep that security, I've actually set customizations on each of the tabs on this report to eliminate that employee ID column just for, security issues or not, security concerns. So right away, you're going to notice that this report is a little more complex because there's more than one reporting tab. So on the P card report, we have this collection of 4 tabs. So we have an analysis tab, an employee report tab. We can look at transactions on the card, and also purchase distributions, which is a more detailed accounting look at the entries for the P card. And as all of our reports, we have a help tab, which will pull up a user guide if you need more information on the use of the report or the tabs. And also defined within all of our user guides are definitions for all these prompt fields as well as the data output columns. So if you're getting used to the report, you're new, you're getting comfortable with how to use it, and you want to know what does transaction status mean or what does merchant mean, one of these fields, it's going to be found within this help tab. There's also tips and tricks, like I showed you, how to export, how to save customizations, how to print, that sort of thing. So we're going to start on the first tab, on the P card net card analysis tab. And as we're going to see, This tab contains the associated documents like vouchers and purchase order information. And it's kind of a new feature that we are adding to some of our reports. Now we're going to give you the ability not just to drill down to underlying dashboards within SFS Analytics to look at associated documents that are tied to the P-card transactions. We're actually going to allow you to click and kind of navigate away from analytics into SFS Financials where you can see some inquiry screens. So that's a new concept with this report for statewide use, to use analytics and these links that we're used to instead of going right to a page. Now we can go into SFS Financials itself. Okay, so I'm going to say the first kind of example I have here, I want to see all P-card charges by employee for my particular business unit. So we're going to, as we always do when we come to an analytics report, we check and see what the required fields are. So this report requires business unit and transaction date. So you'll see that it's just a selection, so you can make a broad selection. I'll caution you not to make it too broad. If you're a large agency and you have lots and lots of transactions, it will, in May, affect performance, or I kind of tune them, but sometimes when folks try to make too big of a selection, it kind of bogs down the report a little bit. So in that case, you'd want to break it down into smaller subsets or maybe apply additional filters. But for now, you'll see that in my customization that I've run for this, I want to see all of September's P-card transactions for this business unit. So when I scroll down, this is what the report's going to look like. So I want to show you right here to the left. This realistically has the employee ID information, but I've hidden it, so you can't see it on the report for our demonstration purposes. I do have a spreadsheet on the next tab where we're going to see what that looks like. But you are able to click and drill on the employee information or the employee number to get to one of the financial screens, and I can show you what that looks like. If you have proper reporting provisions, you'll see two tabs when you come into this view in SFS Financial. So you'll notice that when I click on that column that we're pretending is there, that employee ID column, it's going to bring us to this profile for data for the employee and also for the card. Now, if you don't have proper security provisionings, you will not see this personal data tab. You're only going to see the card data. And again, that's for security. Because you'll see on this personal data, it gives the employee's name, employee ID, and all this personal information, which I've masked for our purposes today. But this will be filled out when you click on that employee ID. And then everyone should have access to this card data. And if we look at that, it will simply give the employee name and then corresponding card attributes. So that's just to show you what it looks like when you drill down on employee ID, which would be right here, but I've hidden it. So other fields that we'll see on this report are the business unit for the employee department, and the department on the transaction, which may or may not be the same. Transaction date and ID, sequence number. Here's our amount. So this is the amount of transaction, the transaction status. Here you'll see when it's staged. We'll see the vendor or merchant, card type, a masked card number, and we'll also see some associated documents, the voucher ID, purchase order, days outstanding, and this is a good field for looking at P-card consolidation. So you can see how long it took these transactions to be consolidated, and then the category ID on the transaction so we know what we were buying. So I mentioned that when we click on these links, we drill not to a subsequent SFS Analytics report, but now we're taking the user to the financials pages, which is a kind of different flavor. So I haven't signed into financials yet today, so this is my login. This PeopleSoft screen should be familiar to everyone, and we'll sign in. And it's going to bring us to the entry screen here. So on this screen, we're going to see that there's various tabs along the top. So there's a summary screen, and this is, again, I drilled on voucher, so this is all voucher attributes. It's going to give business unit, voucher information with supplier, status of the voucher, invoice info, sources, important dates, and the status of the voucher. There's also a document tab, so it's going to show any of those related documents, again, with some information that's meaningful to that voucher. There's also these action links that you can click and take action on. There's an invoice tab, so this is invoice information for the voucher with the lines and distribution lines. So you'll see this gives a lot of insight into that actual transaction. It kind of ties everything together within SFS Financials. We have a payment screen. So again, the voucher information, some invoice, and here's all the payment information on that transaction, some voucher attributes. Hopefully these screens are familiar to some of the people on the call, and there's also a voucher error summary, and this voucher has no errors. So we've looked at that particular voucher that we drilled down on. We did some more research. We're happy and satisfied. You can either close this out, because you'll notice it opened a separate tab. So let's close it. And that'll bring me back to, that'll bring us back to the SFS Analytics report. And now we can look at the purchase order number. Again, it's going to take us over to the financials page. So this is just the inquiry screen for the PO with purchase order information. So this is the associated PO to that voucher that we drilled on. Again, this should be familiar to some of the people on the call who are used to using these screens within financials. So I'll navigate back to the option. I see a thing came in, is there a quarterly option? Well, that's up to you, because you can make the selection whatever you want. So there isn't like a lump sum, quarter one, quarter two, quarter three, but because you have control over the transaction date, yes, you can set your parameters however you want and pull back a whole quarter. For our exercise here, I just chose a month. You know, it's arbitrary. I just chose 1 month. You can even do a week. You can do the quarter, you know, whatever your question is to ask the report. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the Employee Report tab. And this tab allows us to view all the attributes on the card, transaction amounts, and more detailed employee information. So you'll see that the prompt selection here looks similar. And I did run a customization again for this, just to eliminate on this left-hand column here. And I'll show you in the report output. I actually have some sample spreadsheets because these all had employee ID on them. I wanted to hide them. I'll show you what the output looks like. But right now, the first example in business case, I want to see, for the last 2 years, I want to see all all transactions associated to employees for this particular business unit. So you'll see that I get this list. I can click to expand, but I'll show you what the report output looks like. So here, when you export to Excel, now we're looking at just a saved copy of the export to Excel. You'll notice that when we export, our filter is carried over into the export. Now, typically, if I were to use this to do some research, I would just highlight these and hide these rows. So you just highlight, right-click, and you get some options, and you can hide them. It just kind of puts them in the background. And then that allows you here to highlight the top row, and we can add a filter. So now we can do more work, and we can filter on merchant from here. Let's say we want to know, I want to see all of the Home Depot charges and what employees are charging to Home Depot. I can come in here and just filter for that. Or whatever, you know, whatever merchant you want, you just select merchant, and it will return only those rows that have that merchant. So this should be pretty self-explanatory. I just wanted you folks to see what the complete report export would look like with the employee ID. So when I exported this, I just masked the employee ID field. When you export it, it should show the whole field. But again, for any security concerns, I simply just mask the field for, you know, for our purposes here. So you'll see that this returns the employee, the transaction, date and ID, sequence number, the amount on the transaction, the merchant, the card type, and a masked card number, and the description for the transaction and the category, if it was supplied within the transaction, these two fields. So this helps us identify what we're buying from these vendors, right, when we enter the transaction. So if I go back to the report, what if I want to see, so a nice feature, I'll kind of back up a second, a nice feature of this report, right now I'm looking at all the employees, right, for the particular business unit that I selected. Now, if you have a subset of employees, let's say you want to check 3 or 4 employees, you can always use the employer ID field, click this box, and use this search button, like we did on the 470, and you can enter the number, right, the employee ID, and then find them and make a big list here. You can make many searches on different IDs, build out your list on this side, and then click OK, and they should be in this prompt box. The other quick thing that we added, there's something called employee department. So this will group the employees by their department. So if I wanted to see, for instance, this particular central office, I want to see all the P-card transactions for these 2 fiscal years for this particular department, I can make that selection and actually have another customization saved where I'm looking by that group of employees. So it'll just return a smaller subset. Again, you don't see the employee ID, but it's listed here on the left-hand side with the transaction information. And so this should be transactions that only correspond to this particular group. So I guess my point on this tab is instead of bringing back all of the, the whole business unit and all of the transactions, you can use filters for specific employees if you have them in mind, or if you're looking for that whole kind of employee group, that employee department, you can click here and see what options are available and just choose the group, and it will return all of them for the whole group. So that's just a little bit different flavor. So again, when you're using our analytics reports, we like to think of these as very flexible. So the user comes to our reports with specific questions. This is a little different than, say, like a one-off query where you have a very targeted question and you only need a very narrow subset of data. We try to keep these filters as broad as possible and allow the user to make the selections to determine the exact amount and focus of data that comes back. So you'll see that you can answer, dozens and dozens of business needs questions by just one report. So I showed you 2 examples already. We can look at the whole business unit and all of the employees, or now we've narrowed it down. Some other filters on this particular tab are the transaction ID. If you know the transaction, you just want to see that row, you can type it in here. Also the card type. You can click on the box and you can pick which type of card. And also any level on the department. So this came, again, as I explained, for Department of Transportation on their onboarding, they have a unique department structure where it's regional. So they have actually a separate tree for DOT where it breaks out all of these levels at a regional hierarchy instead of from like the typical SFS reporting tree that we're used to on analytics reports. So that's just something new also. If you're familiar with analytics reports, as Jeremy mentioned, we've had DOT, live reports since about April. So I'm sure some of you have noticed that this department tree prompt is available, sprinkled throughout our catalog of reports. Again, it was a requirement on their onboarding. But it's just, again, another way you can choose different reporting trees. And so another thing I want to point out, as many of you are familiar, lots of our reports have alternate views that we can choose. So right now, we're just looking at transactional, like the details on the transaction by the employee. Remember, employees right here. We give us an alternate view of these transactions where now we can select activity by the fiscal calendar. So what that means it's going to break out these transactions So we're going to see the transactions. It's going to kind of lump them together on the month that the transactions were made. So if I had a business case for this, I'd say I want to see something like all of my employee transactions by month. So we can come up here. I have a save customization, and we can add some months. You'll see that it'll show the report in a different view because I chose this different view, and now we're looking at the fiscal calendar. The employee ID in theory is right here, and I've asked it to show me employee by merchant. So who are we paying? What employees are paying who by a monthly view? So we can see that this particular merchant's paid monthly, right? And here's the sum total of transactions for that merchant. If I were to add employee ID, it would kind of break this sum total out by employee, so you can see who's collectively responsible for these charges. I think this is nice because it gives you kind of a view into the more detailed, like lump sum by month. And again, this is because I made a large selection in the fiscal year, why it's showing 21 and 22. It's almost like a comparison, so you can compare month to month over years. You know, it depends on what your particular question is on how you were going to use this particular view. But I just wanted to make everyone aware that there is this alternate view. So it's not giving us transactional details, but it's giving us more, what was the activity per, month that was selected for the fiscal years. And if we look at our report here, we can see it here. So this is with the employee ID added. So we're looking at merchant by employee. So you can see, like, this particular vendor had all these employees charging towards them, and you can see which employees paid how much to that vendor for each month for the selected fiscal periods. So again, I just wanted to show you what the actual output would look like for that business case. I want to see the payments by employee by merchant for the monthly charges for the selected fiscal years. Okay, so I'll move on to the card report tab. Now, the P-card report tab, this is almost, you can think of it like a simplified view that displays cards and transaction attributes with associated employee information. So it's similar to this initial tab here, this analysis tab, it just doesn't have the associated documents. So if you'll recall, we were drilling down into the vouchers to bring us to those inquiry screens and also the purchase orders to the inquiry screens on SFS. This just kind of eliminates those, and it's more of a consolidated view. So again, we'd have employee ID right here with the associated transaction information. So this is just a nice quick view. Who is making what purchases to who in what amount? So what employee is making which purchases to which vendor and in what amount? Also with what P card? So it's a nice simple report. Now, it gives us totals at the bottom. If we did want to print this report, again, we can go to this page option, hover over the print, and you'll see that we can print to a PDF or HTML. Now, if you had a big, long list here, and it spans more than one screen, when you do print, it should print all pages of the report, not just what's displaying on screen. And also, just as a tip, when I like to print, I like to collapse the section just because you don't have that big clunky section when you print. You don't really need to see what you were entering as your filters because, as I mentioned before, they're maintained here in this filter box. Now, we mentioned earlier that this is for a little bit more advanced users. I'm coming with the impression that most people on this call have at least some exposure and some comfort in using our analytics reports today. Now, if any of you have attended any of our introductory demos or classes, trainings, workshops, we give just a quick overview on how to use the report. I want to show everybody kind of a tip that I typically avoid in those intro classes. It is a little bit more advanced, not as obvious, and the use is very specific. So here's kind of a scenario. I want to look, I like this output, right? I'm happy with my prompts. I want to see all the transactions and the employees and the card attributes for this time period. Now, I want to do more analysis, and I want to look based on the supplier, but I don't want to come up here every time and have to enter supplier over and over again, and I don't want to export it to Excel. Typically, I would export to Excel, add that filter like I showed you, where then I can choose my supplier. Well, a really cool feature of OBIEE, which is the reporting tool that we use in analytics, if we hover over the column header, some of you, this might be familiar, and you right-click, you come up with hidden options for that column. So you can sort the column in meaningful ways. If I didn't need this column, I could exclude it. There's also on almost all reports, includable columns. So if I wanted to add employee ID back to this report right now, I could. What I did when I set this customization, I excluded that column for our demo and I saved it so that you folks on the call can't see it. But if I wanted to add it back right now, I could. And there's also these department levels. Now, these includable prompts are the same on every dashboard, but if I changed over, say, to this tab, you might have different options on the different tabs. So that's just something to explore too while you're becoming familiar with these reports. Now, what I want to show you right now, if I want to look at, per vendor, I want to see what transactions are taking place for a specific vendor and what associated P cards or associated employees, I can go to this here where it says move column to prompts. Now, I typically don't show this in a training. So now you'll see that in the report output, it took that column. It's no longer supported here in the output. Now it's actually a promptable field. So all of those merchants that were listed in list form now are up here where I can choose and say, I want to see only my Easy Pass payments and who's making those payments and what cards are associated. I can do that. Instead of going to Excel, you might not need to save it. It might be for curiosity or other work, but this will show you, maybe I want to see this vendor and what transactions took place, or, this vendor and who's making those payments. So this is available on most reports. There's some exceptions to the rule, but this move to prompts is available on most reports. So also, I can't really show you now because of those security concerns, but let's pretend that there was the employee ID column here. I could just pivot that up to a prompt and prompt on employee and say, show me all the transactions that employee made. And it will show you who made the transactions, because you're choosing, John Doe made this transaction on these dates in these amounts with this card to, again, merchant would still be in this output, right? I can also click and drag it back into the report. So we'll pretend that employee got put into the prompts. Now we'll see, it'll return the report by employee and all this information. So it's another way to filter on screen. This is in our tips and tricks. It's in the user guide. It's just something I typically don't get into for mostly time purposes in an intro class, also just to not overwhelm everyone with too much information. So I hope that's a useful tip for everyone on the call today, that you can use any of these and just move it up to the prompts, and then you can make your selections there if you want to look one by one. So that's a nice handy, handy tip. So that's the card report. Now the last tab on the report is purchase distribution. So this allows us to view transactions at the chart field level. So what on the document was keyed in on the voucher when the P card was reconciled. So here you'll see we give more options for filtering. We also do on this analysis tab. But here I've made choices. I want to see all of the transactions for the entire fiscal year of 2022 and 2021 for this business unit. Now that might be a lot of data, right? You can slice it further. Maybe you only want to see by a particular vendor or by a particular project. So I want to see all P card transactions by project. So what's going to happen is it's going to return, if any of you are familiar with the DW 438 ad hoc report, it's similar to that in that we give you the ability to build out your columns however you want. So right now we had to put something. So right now we're looking at this slice by account. So if I were to remove this, I'll just kind of, so see, we can exclude, right click and exclude. So it'll return just this big lump sum total. So this is the total per accounting period for my selected fiscal years. And you'll notice we can scroll, right? So we get some totals per year, grand totals at the bottom, but this doesn't give us very good detail. This is just a lump sum. So now I, as the user, get to make the decision. How do I want to slice and dice this data? Well, I want to see by account, and I want to see by, I don't know, category, so that we can see exactly what types of things we're buying. So what accounts are we charging, and what sort of goods are we buying? So I make my selections. You can make up to 5, and then you click OK here, and the report will rerun to slice those totals. I don't know why account didn't show up again. Maybe because let's try this. Ready? Maybe sneaky. There we go. So now my account and my category have been applied, and you can see how it breaks out those totals into the unique combinations of those two chart fields. So that's helpful in doing a little bit more in-depth transactional analysis. This aligns with the transactional chart fields. Again, it will give us, per unique combination, the totals on the right-hand side here, and also totals at the bottom for the grand totals for each, for each accounting period. Now, you can build out up to 5. So maybe you want to see your core chart fields, account, program, fund, and department. You can do that too, and it would just expand your selections here. Now you'll notice, and those of you familiar with analytics, every time you see a blue link, you should get excited, because then you click on it, it means there's more things to see. So if I, for instance, want to say, okay, I'm looking at April of this fiscal year. So here's all of my, unique combinations of these two chart fields. I want to see the daily breakdown. So now we can click on that header. This takes a little bit to render because we have to break down that into the dailies. But now you can see exactly what, the transactions per day. So this just gives us just that much more detail. And again, it's up to you, the user, what level of detail you're looking for when trying to answer your business question. So I just wanted to let everyone know, that this is available also, this daily view, not only the monthly view of these transactional details, but also this daily transactional view. So again, those of you familiar with analytics, I want to go back to the top screen. We do not use this button here. It might wipe out all your selections and you have to start over. We use these breadcrumbs at the bottom. So just like Hansel and Gretel, we want to find our way back. We click on the breadcrumb, and it brings us back to the report we were just looking at. So that concludes what I want to show with these two reports. So again, this P card report's brand new. If you do need more help, you can, while you're getting started, you can click on this Help tab here, and it should open our DW426 user guide. So you'll see it has the same look and feel as our other user guides. Each tab is broken out, so we can look tab by tab, and gives us a purpose, screenshots, and as I mentioned, it's going to give us the definition for the fields that we're looking at, not only in the prompts, but also in the data output. So here's the data output, what that looks like. And here's all the definitions. And if there's any action, like what happens when I click on employee ID, it's going to bring us into SFS Financials to the cardholder profile like I showed you on that Word document. So, I urge everybody to kind of take a look at this before you get started. I'll give you a little bit more information. And to get back, we can just, click on any of the tabs, or if I wanted to return home, there's 2 ways to get back to the home page. You can use the breadcrumbs, or every dashboard has this button that we can click, and it just brings us home. Now, we went through that pretty quickly. I hope it was meaningful. I hope we learned some tips and, you know, that there's a brand new report out there for P-cards and that it's useful. Now, because this is a new report and it's not only a DOT report anymore, we've kind of opened it up statewide because we know that this is a very useful thing for people. If there's anything lacking or things you want to see on the report, feel free to submit a business case. So you say submit a request, and it opens this little link to a business case form. It's very brief. You just fill it out. So if there's something you'd like additionally, you know, this is an infant report, as I like to think of it. Like, it's brand new, always room for improvement. There's things I'm sure we're not thinking of. We need to hear from the users, though. We don't know if there's something else that's needed to help you in your day-to-day. And also, if you're hitting stumbling blocks, you don't know, you know, you need more assistance, you can always click on the help desk link. They're all over the place within our reports. They're on each help tab at the top. They're on this help and update tile. Submit a request. You know, you'll see the help all over the place. You just open the Outlook item and you write us an email. And they'll either answer your question or get it to someone who can answer your question. So that's all I had for today. I'm grateful for your participation and everyone's attention this morning. So right now, we'll just kind of leave it open for question and answers.
Thanks, Rebecca. So just following up on that feature, the going to prompts that you show that you don't usually show in other sessions, there's a question, can those two prompts be used on multiple columns at once? Let's
try it. Ready? So we're just, you know, I'm just picking, arbitrarily picking. Indeed.
Great. All right. So we did have a few questions about counting period. I think that was with the first report you were showing. There were a couple of comments of if a select all function can be added, so you don't have to click through all 12 months.
Sure. So we're looking at this vouchers to cash, correct? The first report? So I'll show you how to do that in an easy way. Yeah, you do have to click them all. So we're trying to save you from yourself. So I mentioned that large agencies with lots of data, that might not be your best idea unless, because if you have thousands of rows come back, I mean, and by thousands, I mean like tens of thousands of rows come back, which is definitely possible on a yearly voucher search, right? That might make your report never return. So we do have a governor set on our reports that they will time out after 30 minutes. So sometimes people want to go in and make several fiscal years with all accounting periods and they want to report. That's difficult to return that volume of data. This is not an extraction tool, it's an analytics tool. But I'll show you how to do it. So we're a tiny agency, so it's probably going to work for SFS. But instead of, it's going to take you probably the same exact amount of time, but I'll show you how to do it. So instead of selecting all of them like this, right, and now I have to go unselect them. Let me show you, and this is for any field, like any of these prompts. You can click search. Now see how these are all available here? Watch this, it's a big trick. You click this double arrow, oops, they all moved over. Now we've selected all 12 months, and now they're all selected. So it's a different, you know, it's a different way. And that's only because it's required. Like you have to make selections. On other fields, if you don't make a, so say supplier, for instance, if I want all suppliers returned, well, don't choose anything because these prompts act as filters. So we're filtering for nothing right now by not making a selection. The only reason that doesn't work on the required fields is because we're forcing you to make a selection. So if you want all selections, you have to select them all. Whereas here, we're not making a selection, you know, you don't have to, so it's going to return everything if it's not told to return something specific.
Great.
That's a good question, though.
Yes, yes. While we're on the 470, there was a question, will the 470 also show vouchers that are posted by other agencies or our agency with our coding?
You'll have to look at their business unit. If the AP business unit is their business unit, you'll have to make that alternate selection, but yes, you should be able to see them. So we have the ability to choose, like for instance, the example I like to give, maybe Department of Health has given some funds to OMH, right, Office of Mental Health, and Office of Mental Health is, or vice versa, is making purchases for that other agency. They're going to use their own business unit, but they're going to use the second agency's coding. So yeah, they would, you just have to choose the other business unit. I hope that made sense. But yes, it's available. And if you go in and you're having trouble, definitely send a help desk. You know, we can walk you through it.
So there were a couple of questions. This was related to the PCOG report about if there's available to add report columns to include MWBE and SDVOB for merchants.
Right, that's good. I don't believe those are added, so that would be a request. And we already load those into analytics, so it shouldn't take too much effort to get those added. There was a question, what is the move to section? So when you right-click, if I wanted to see only the transactions, so this is fun to play with. So you can make actual sections on the report. I know that doesn't look like much, but I moved all those transactions into one transaction, essentially. If I wanted to look at all the merchants, it breaks them out. So now you can see transactions by merchant that way too, all on one screen. It's really cool stuff to play with. You're not going to break anything as long as you don't save it as a default customization. It should go away when you navigate away from the report. But I definitely encourage everybody to play with any of these, you know, right-click on things, click on all your links, kind of see what the report does. It's brand new, so you might have features that you're not aware of. And again, I don't really typically go through these right-click features other than like including or excluding columns.
So we did have a question about the recording of this session. So we do record these sessions, and we will provide the recording to OSC, to the fall conference team over there. They post the recordings. They should be along with the presentations that they've already posted. So this presentation is already up on the OSC site. So once we get the recording for this, then we will send it to OSC. We are just about at time, but we do want to thank everyone very much today for joining. As Rebecca said, we hope you found this very helpful and useful, and we hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.